Thanks. So I'm Kerry Tribe, and the format that we imagined for today is that I would just talk for a couple of minutes at the beginning about this project, and then I would turn it over to Mike Biel, who's a speech-language pathologist, and then Francie Schwartz, who leads the Aphasia Book Club at the Echo Park Public Library, and then Susan Swan, who moderates the Aphasia support group at Cedars. And then Susan would invite the three people who are in the film to speak a little bit about either their experience in the film or about their experience with aphasia. And those three people are Dale Benson and Laura Romero and Christopher Riley. So I wanted to just start out by saying thank you, and I'm going to just hold this one here until you need to talk so that you don't have to think about it. I just wanted to thank you all for coming out. One of the things that's been a great pleasure about doing this project is seeing people from all different walks of life and different backgrounds and interests and experience coming together around this project that we made together, which is really fantastic. And I feel incredibly grateful and privileged to have been able to work with the incredible crew at 356 Mission and Laura Owens and all of these totally beautiful, amazing people who've invited me into their lives and who've been willing to work with me on this project. And I didn't think I would need to make any plans about what I would say as introduction, but now I have no idea what to say as an introduction. Has everyone, can you raise your hand if you have not been into the show or seen the film at all yet? Okay, so only a couple people. So there's time, you can go in and see the show, and but basically there is a film, it's a half an hour long, it plays in the back half of the space. It's narrated entirely by Dale and Laura and Chris, all of whom have a condition called aphasia, which is the result of trauma to the language centers of the brain, and Mike will speak a little more about that. I have been doing work mostly in time-based media, film and video installation, for about 15 years, I think now, that generally has to do with ideas around consciousness and memory and how film and video can represent those things. And I've said this a couple of times to some of you already, but when I started this project, I really thought I was going to make a kind of impossible documentary with talking heads talking about having aphasia. And my thought was, if the premise of the good documentary where people authentically tell you about their lived experience involves people talking about their lived experience, then someone that has aphasia, who by definition has a hard time talking about their lived experience, would become a kind of impossible subject. And I'm interested in that idea and in how not being able to say what you mean introduces a problem for documentary practices and for knowing about one another in the world in general. But as the project went on, and as I had an invitation to show it here, it became clear to me that the setup that I would use was kind of perfect. Basically building that wall with those pillars that are there set up 3 screens. And once I had 3 screens, I knew I wanted to work with 3 people. And I'd already met some amazing, wonderful people through these support groups I'd been attending, but something about Chris and Laura and Dale triangulated really beautifully for me in ways that I could really identify with things I saw happening in all of their lives and in their experience. And so the project became much more of a kind of experimental, abstract portrait of 3 people that I had come to know and respect and really love. And in the process became kind of autobiographical about art making and about this space and its history. So that's really all I have to say as an introduction. If you haven't seen the film already, I'll just mention that you never get to see these 3 people. All of the footage is something else. And it was, I think, incredibly brave of them to get on board and know that they were going to be recorded over and over again so that their voices would be repeated for a large audience without them there to explain anything or babysit that representation. So that was the first brave move. Well, trusting an artist at all was probably the first brave move. Willing to be documented was the second. And then for everyone here to be game to get up and speak in front of all of you, I think is also incredibly brave. So I would just like to offer an introduction and a little round of applause for our incredible subjects.
Hi, my name's Mike Biel. I'm a speech pathologist and assistant professor at Cal State Northridge. I guess I'll start off by defining aphasia. Aphasia is a language impairment that results from some kind of brain damage to the areas of the brain that process language, which for most of us is the left side of our brain. Most people with aphasia have aphasia due to a stroke, although some people have aphasia due to head injury or a brain tumor, and occasionally disease processes, some more or less rare forms of early dementia. It's important to kind of realize that for people with aphasia, their problems are really isolated to using language, to processing language. So by definition, people with aphasia have difficulty doing anything that requires language. So not just speaking, but understanding speech, reading, writing. There's obviously different degrees of aphasia, and within those different degrees of aphasia, some people have a little bit more difficulty reading than they have understanding speech, or vice versa. But people with aphasia all have some difficulty managing language. People with aphasia, other than their language problems, are more or less cognitively intact. Okay? So one of the things that people with aphasia commonly have to deal with is that they're stigmatized as being less than completely mentally competent. Because, of course, I think that we just naturally judge people, judge their intelligence by what they say, what they're capable of saying, how they say it. I've been heard it described to me as having aphasia as something like imagining that you knew a little bit of a language, and someone dropped you into some village in a country where you knew a little bit of that language, and you knew what you wanted to say. You were perfectly clear, but you didn't really have the words to express the ideas that were in your mind, and you struggled to follow what other people were saying. Okay, so there's this sense that or not sense, but the people with aphasia are intellectually competent. And that's one of the very frustrating things in my experience, 20-some years working with people with aphasia, is the degree to which people don't understand their condition. Most of us, I think, have never heard of aphasia unless we have some personal experience with it. Aphasia is not a medical condition. It results from a medical condition like stroke, but there was a survey recently that kind of tested how well the public knew what aphasia is, and very few people did. Most of the people taking the survey knew what multiple sclerosis is, knew what Parkinson's disease is, right? Those are medical conditions, but there are more people in this country with aphasia than MS and Parkinson's disease combined. In Los Angeles County, if you look at the prevalence of aphasia across the country, we can expect that there's about 30,000 people in LA County with aphasia. For me, what I've experienced, and the people on this panel are not examples of this experience. I think in some ways they're extraordinary individuals because of their commitment to staying active and engaged in social life. But for the people that I see, oftentimes, their difficulty communicating makes them incredibly socially isolated. And they're not able to do something as simple as demonstrate their mental competency to others. They're not able to do something as simple as assert their autonomy sometimes by making choices themselves. They struggle to establish new relationships with people. They struggle to maintain the relationships that they have. Again, that's not always the case, but in my experience, by and large, that's the experience. The last point I'll say is that aphasia is a treatable condition. You may see stories in the news like Gabby Gifford, right? Amazing recovery, right? She did quite well. Gabby Gifford's case makes me sad, right? Because she got the resources to get better that very few people in this country have the option to get, right? We can help people with aphasia. We can help them in very significant ways. But it takes a lot of help. And it takes a long time, too. So it takes a great deal of patience on both parties, the therapist and the patient. But aphasia is, I think, treatable. A person with aphasia may never return to being as fluent as they were, but that's not to say that they can't make considerable and meaningful improvements. I think that's about it.
Great.
Great. Hello. My name is Francie Schwartz. I am a public librarian. I've been a librarian since 1992. I'm also married to him. And Mike actually had the idea of some way that he and I could combine our skill set and do something together. And it was his idea to have a book club for people with aphasia at a public library. I work for the city of Los Angeles. I've been with them for almost 3 years now. And so we decided to try and put this together. He got Dale involved first, and he said, Dale, can you find some friends for me? And Dale got a bunch of people from the Cedars Sinai support group for people with aphasia, and they formed the core of our planning group. We had 4 or 5 people that were there at the very beginning deciding how it was going to go, what kind of materials we were going to use, how often we would meet, how long the meetings would be, and so on. We wanted to make sure very early on that people with aphasia were actively involved in that planning part. And so we did it. And I have to say, I've looked around. I've looked at library literature. I've done various online searches. There are other book clubs for people with aphasia. There's one in Oakland at the Aphasia Center, Center of California. There's one in Toronto at the Toronto Aphasia Institute. There are different ones at hospitals and clinics in various parts of North America. To my knowledge, this club that we have at the Echo Park branch with the City of Los Angeles is the only public library provided book club for people with aphasia anywhere. Let me just repeat that. We are the only public library to offer a book club for people with aphasia, at least in North America, and maybe in the entire English-speaking world, although I can't promise you that. But we're doing something that nobody else is doing, by and large, and I'm so, so proud of that fact. We have, I don't know, are any of you in a book club? Well, yes, you are. But anybody else? Oh, great, wonderful. How many of you have library cards, by the way? Oh, good, okay. Well, everybody else, get one. We need your help. We really, truly need your support. But I got a little sidetracked because I have to do that every time I talk to anybody about libraries. But our book club is a little different, and for various reasons. Most book clubs that I'm aware of, they meet once a month. at that one meeting, they talk about one book, and then they're done. The next month, they go on to another book. The month after that, it's something else. When you have aphasia, and reading and speaking, and even listening, if you, like, you know, maybe you can't read at all and you have to hear, like in audio format, your book, it takes longer to absorb what it is, the material that you're working on. So we have it so that we meet once a week. We just discuss 2 chapters a week, and it takes us several weeks to get through one book. So it can be even like as much as 4 months to get through one book. And so when we just do those 2 chapters a week, we really dig into those 2 chapters. And that can be kind of painful sometimes, because if they don't like the book, we have to live with it for a long time. And I always feel bad. but in any case, it's been such an interesting process. And, you know, as a librarian, of course, I want people to read, but I also want people to come to the library and just know what we have there. We have all kinds of resources. We offer things, we try and, you know, make as much available to as many people as possible. But here was this one group of people who, even though they technically could walk into any library they wanted to and check out anything they wanted for free, we were not doing a very good job at making materials accessible and available to them, because it was, you know, if you have trouble reading, it doesn't matter if there's 100 books on the shelf, right? But if you're in a situation where you can sit down with a group of other people who are in the same boat as you are and take your time, and you give each other plenty of time to talk and you listen, it's a different way of interacting, and it makes those materials much more available to those people who need them. I should add, one of the things we did was we initially purchased some supportive worksheets from the Aphasia Institute in Oakland, and they would give like chapter highlights in very kind of simple aphasia-friendly terms, and there would be worksheets at the end, and we would go through those at the beginning of every meeting to make sure that people were understanding what it was that the book was saying at that point. We've gotten to the point now where we don't necessarily need to buy those materials, and that has freed us up to basically read whatever we want. We don't just have to use the list of things that they have in Oakland that we can purchase. We can make our own worksheets if we want. We can read anything now, provided that the library has it. So, and when you're talking about the city of Los Angeles, that's a big system. We have 70 branches. Probably we have it, and lots of copies. So now, what we've learned is that the group doesn't really want to read popular literature anymore, you know, or bestsellers. They want to read classics. So our next book is going to be Catcher in the Rye. We're going to start that in a couple of weeks. So far, we've read what? What have we read? The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I think most of the group didn't like, unfortunately. And I felt really bad. But there was that. There was A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. We've read My Stroke of Luck by Kirk Douglas. I'm sorry? And most of them didn't like that one, yeah. And what else did we read? The Lost City of Z. And Water for Elephants. And, The Souvenir by Louise Steinman from the Library Foundation. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, well, okay, all right. No, okay. So one of the things we had to do, because any program that the public library offers has to be free. Now, the supportive materials that we bought from the Aphasia Center of California in Oakland were, you know, not free. We had to, I think it's, for the average book, the materials cost about $165. And depending on what kind of materials the library owned already, for instance, let's say we have lots of copies in print of Catcher in the Rye, but no audio copies, for instance, then we would have to buy audio copies from, say, Amazon or some other source. So we can't ask our members to pay for that, even though many of them were willing to do that. And Mike and I, didn't really want to buy them all ourselves. And actually probably I was not allowed to do that anyway as part of my job. So I applied for a grant through the Library Foundation, and I got a $1,500 grant. And that was the seed money to help us get all these materials and get going. So now we've used all the grant money, but fortunately we figured out how to kind of do this without it. So I'm happy we can go on indefinitely, I think.
However, there is the possibility, should anyone be interested in making a charitable tax-deductible donation to the Aphasia Book Club through the Library Foundation, and I'd be happy to take any, if anyone's interested, I can tell you how to do that afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Gosh, everybody's helping me. We are, because this group was successful, Mike found some speech pathologists in the Valley who are interested in starting a group there. So they're going to use a branch near CSUN. It's the Mid-Valley branch. And so there's going to be another group, an additional group, probably starting sometime next month. So we're really happy about that. We're also we're just at the very, very planning stages of trying to start a movie club somewhere on the west side. So maybe a branch like around Palms or Mar Vista or that area where people with aphasia can sit and watch a movie together and spend an hour or so discussing it. We kind of want to make this not just really about books, but about just experiencing art, experiencing life. It gives people an opportunity to talk about everything, not just about their experience not being able to order something at a restaurant or whatever. I mean, it's just, when you're talking about a really good book, or even a crappy book for that matter, and there's always something in there that's going to be about you or your life or someone you knew. There's always something to talk about that is not about your disability. And when that happens, the disability becomes kind of incidental. We're just a group of people talking about this book. And often, honestly, I forget. I get to a point where I forget that people in the group are having trouble speaking. I'm just listening, and they're saying stuff, and it's all interesting. And I'm so grateful for that. It's, I wanted to help people, but I'm finding it so enriching that I'm really, really happy to be able to do it. I think that's it. Okay.
I'm Susan Spahn, and I kind of the boss of the aphasia support group at Cedars. Chrissy and my daughter insisted that I go, my speech pathologist, and I was not going to do it. I'm not a joiner. It's the best thing that ever happened. I met so many wonderful people. We meet once a week, and this has been going on for about 18 years. Yeah. When Sherry, yeah. Now we have about, my roster is about 35 people, my list. We get about 18 to 20 people every week. We're very fun people. We have a good time. What? It's its typical support group, but one of the, I asked them, what should I say? And they said, it's a place I can be myself. We give each other space to talk. If you want help, you get help. If you want to figure it out ourselves, then we're happy to do that. Yeah, we're understood. We share our stories, our tips, our techniques. It's very helpful that way. And there's always cookies. Dale. And Dan. Yeah, somebody said, well, what did you get from how do you keep going with, since the stroke? I said, I would never have made these amazing friends. I mean, it's one of the riches of having a stroke. I guess that's it. And I would like to introduce Dale from our group, both at Cedars and the book club.
Hi, my name is Dale Benson of the SEALs, United States Navy, and I'd like to try something with you each. I have something here that I'd like to put across to you as consummation. And we want to go as fast as possible around these people, one by one. Ready? Go. Good. Be aware that could be a white. Good. Bring it here a second. Heart. Very, very interesting. For ours, we have the Aphasia, and we bring back almost 25% of all the hearts.
I'll just hold this for you. That's right.
Okay. And it's something that is very, very important for us to get it out. And that's what we're here doing today. Thank you very much for all you put it together. Once when I was in Vietnam, I was in an airplane, and when you go up I was going off 3, 1, 2, 3. You got to go out the aft end of it, and I would go 1, 2, 3, and I swear every part of me went without thought of a heart, I thought. And I also learned that you got to learn how to not spat so fast. Work it a little bit at a time, like my name is Dale. And I couldn't get that before for a long time. The other thing I had the same problem. We had the hail on top of it. It's a helm, right? But it was like a platter. Platherist. Platherist. Platherist.
That's the leather?
Something like that. And we go like this. And they go. We go out like this, and then they go. And it's gone. Everything was gone. Everything was gone. And then I found myself, a long time later, I had to have a heart that made me win. I couldn't get it out. I would die everything the same. Nothing would come out. But those kind of things we have to learn a little bit about.
Close.
And, when I got myself like that, I put up a project that I'm in with people. His name is Debbie Semi-Quaker. And he's an awful lot of problems, a lot of problems. He does a 64th note. And he's always I couldn't get that out. I couldn't get any of that. So eventually, I'm blind today. I at least talk a little bit better. And I want to thank you for everything. And all my children, my for all the children that I belong to. Thank you.
You're next? Or are you on? Laura Ramirez. I mispronounced your name. Laura. The Laura. The
Hi, I'm Laura. Okay. What I wanted to say was, why did I want to start the project and do this with Kerry? And I actually wasn't sure, but I wanted to do something creative again. And that was very important to me. But I learned all these wonderful things about Dale, who you can tell is wildly creative. I mean, his whole being is creative. And you will hear Chris, in the film as a photographer and all of his work at Aphasia group, at the stroke group. I got a chance to see some of his photography work that he did in Taiwan? No,
Hong Kong.
thank you. Hong Kong. And so successful and beautiful black and white. And I got to be a part of that and be a part of that with Kerry. And for a year. So it was very wonderful for me because I got to learn all these new things about each person that I don't think I would have gotten to know before. And the book group, I didn't go to Cedars Sinai's first. I went to the book group first. And I just went on a lark. And then I got adopted by Susan to the aphasia group in.
It's kind of like the mob. You can get in, but you can't get out.
So my life would not be near as rich without these people. Yeah. And I don't know quite how to express that. There's lots I don't know how to exactly express, but I love them all, and I'm grateful for it. It's for them. It's really for them.
And it rekindled you can express yourself creatively.
Exactly.
It's a big thing. But the exhibit explains that.
Oh, and we go to exhibits, we go to galleries and museums. It's wonderful. So it's wonderful.
And the lovely gentleman on my left
Yes.
is Chris Riley.
Hi. Thank you. Kara, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dale, Laura, thank you. Thank you. Susan, Swan, thank you. Thank you. But most, thank you, dear. Bye.
I want to add, if I can, Chris, again, this project, thank you for Kerry in reawakened Chris's artistic. Once you have a deficit, you think everything is gone or very much impaired. So finding a way to continue being productive and important and creative. And we all want to say thank you. When Kerry came and said, "Can I come to the group?" I said, "Oh, okay, fine. Who are you?" Just don't interrupt us. Because part of the thing is people want to finish our sentences, and we know what we want to say, and we'll get there eventually, or not. And Kerry fit in so lovely and gracious, and we love her. And it's like, who is this? She wants to do an art project. Wow, so. We are so glad, and we have received so many of the benefits of your heart and your art. So I think we're gonna open it up for questions.
And I just want to say there is a wireless microphone. If you have a question, I will bring it to you
Okay.
so that everyone can hear. Does anybody want to go first?
They've been struck dumb. That's our category.
I have a question. As somebody that works in the gallery and is here every day, I've had a couple people ask me if any of the three people that participate in the video, kind of what their first experience was of seeing it, or if they, I guess there's a basic question about like representation, and if this feels like you. To me, in my mind, the way I think of it is like when you hear your voice on record or when I'm hearing it right now through the speakers, and I think that's not me. And I can only expect maybe there's a magnification of that, or that's just a question we get a lot. And so I wonder, Laura or Chris or Dale, if you guys could speak to that.
For me, I know that Kerry allowed me, she was very gracious and allowed me to, like the little snippet the first time, to make sure I was comfortable, but also because I have trouble processing information. So like sometimes I can hear it too fast, and then I go home and I'm like, what did I hear?
What?
Yeah, and I would tell my husband, he'd ask, what did you do? And I'm like, I'm not sure. It's good. I know it's good, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So that, and then later anyway, I forget sometimes. But now, as it's all put together, I feel like it's me, but it's also Kerry. Does that make sense? We were talking about that. And so it's the lens of me that I'm more than fine with, but I can also see it outside of myself and as a piece that Kerry wants to represent. And with compassion for us, I think, but also telling a story. I don't know. I was comfortable. And I don't know for anyone else.
No. Good, yes, good.
Did you feel that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I had so much to say to her. First thing I learned was in SEALs, we're very forward, and that's all we do. And one thing we don't do is we don't cry very much. And after a while, I was going, it's okay. That's it. Thank you. And I still thank you.
Maurice.
I read the article in the LA Times about what the art was about here, and I was surprised about it, the issue being a download of information, and how it's hard to express yourself when you get that download. I noticed that on the internet or just on Facebook, it's there, right in front of you. How do you respond to that? Do you just slow things down? How do you take in that information, and how does it affect you, if it does at all?
I don't think I understand. Do you?
Is it a general question just to clarify, is it a general question for people with aphasia, what it feels like to process incoming information when it's too much?
Yes.
Yeah, so if anyone here with aphasia wants to talk about that experience of, sounds like you're talking about when all the information is right there, but you can't make sense of it?
Yes.
Would you like to say anything about that? Anyone?
I could speak to that. For example, I came to the opening, and it was so lovely. So many people here. The movie was playing. People are outside. The energy was high because it's the opening night. I couldn't hear a thing, and my sensory overload was just the Uma's thing, because it was too much. Is that kind of what you're? Yeah. And so I said, okay, Sanjo, I remember you saying, do it a little bit, get yourself strong a little bit. Remember that at Narayan's house? Okay, I'll listen to this music and these cacophonous sounds for a while, and then remove yourself. And I'll have to come back and see the exhibit in a peaceful time. So you have to moderate yourself and say a little bit and a little bit. It's like life, but it's slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
Do any of the aphasic people
Yeah.
want to speak to this?
Yeah.
Larry, speak.
I don't need backbone. I was a member of the club for a long time. In fact, it's more time than I've ever been in any club. Because the ones that would have me, I didn't want to deal with. And the ones that I felt I should be with, I felt they were not equipped. Anyway, it didn't do me any good. So I came to this one with a lot of moaning and groaning. And I learned so much in the group. That I was how should I put it? I thought I should. I learned so much from other people that I felt it deserves me to be part of it. And I did. And I am, and I still do feel the part of it. So I want to thank the group and whoever organized the group for enriching my life, really enriching it. More than I felt was going to be possible when I realized I lost it, the tongue, and thank you.
One thing I just want to say is it's pretty clear. When I say we, I've also, I don't want to block you, but I don't want to get close to that speaker. I've been adopted also by the aphasic community. I've been told I can speak aphasic now. But one thing that you're hearing, for those of you who didn't, maybe you came to this and you thought it would be like an artist's talk or there'd be art history or something, but one of the big clear messages I think is how much we like us. And that's not to say we're a bunch of self-involved, narcissistic, egotistical people, but it feels really good to find yourself in a space where you're allowed to really be yourself and communicate at your own rate. And one of the things that, like when I tried to say what I was trying to do with the film when I started was make a piece about aphasia, but I felt I ended up making a portrait of three people and kind of myself, a sort of, it's like you said, I loved what you said, Laura, that it's about you, but it's also about Kerry, about me. But one of the things that, if it's not really clear by now, is that a community of people who are very open together find ways of communicating in all kinds of incredibly effective and meaningful, really meaningful ways that are not necessarily based in clear, rational, linguistic communication. And for me, that was a tremendous relief to discover. It was an accidental silver lining and a lot of people that have strokes, whose lives get totally reorganized by strokes, nobody will say it's easy, but most people acknowledge certain gifts that weren't expected that come along with it, like not living a life so driven by stress and feeling you need to accomplish every little thing you thought you have to do to be happy. Like, suddenly I think it becomes quite clear what you really need to do to be happy, which in this moment might mean eat a sandwich. Like, maybe you don't have to win that award or get that job or something else. So all this to say that I think something that, one of the reasons I wanted today to happen, and something that I hope is evident in the film, is that there's an incredibly beautiful, poetic, meaningful language that's spoken sometimes through words and sometimes through physical contact or gestures or some nonverbal thing that just happens that might actually be enabled by this condition in some way. I mean, who knows about the science, but I feel that the kind of openness and willingness to really be oneself around others and kind of say fuck it to all of the stuff that you normally worry about makes for something really rare in day-to-day experience in a room full of people that you otherwise wouldn't know. So if it feels like a lot of like cheering, hooray, we're so great, yay, we really like our group, it's like because it really is totally great and incredibly special. They're really special. But anyway, so I wanted to just kind of jump in and like hone in on that point, because it's a disability around communication, but it also provides an opportunity for enhanced communication that we don't usually think about.
Can I, oh.
Before you sit back down,
Yeah.
where was the actual genesis of this project for you? And is this going to go to other cities, or is this a one-time installation?
Right. Good question. I don't know which mic this is, but I'll just speak loudly. I've been doing work around memory and neuroscience and stuff for some time. And in 2012, I wrote a grant application on a whim. It sounded like a good idea to make art about aphasia. I got the grant, and then I kind of put it on hold while other things developed. But for me, the idea of, I make representation, and we all do in our lives, and that's how we come to be known to the world. We put something out there of ourselves. And that's, as an artist, I'm there with my work out all the time. I'm not there to know what people think of it. It represents me, and our speech represents us. So it seems, I'm excited that I got involved in this project because it feels to me like it has legs. Like for me, the idea of the problems of representation I've been thinking about for cinema and stuff over the years has found a very comfortable home, and it's rich, and I'm still interested in these stories, and the project might get reconfigured to something else. The way it is here is very much also about this space. It's sort of taken up the site of 356 Mission as its body or something. And I don't know how that would be experienced in a different venue, but certainly the film is available to travel. I mean, the 3-channel work is available to travel. Hopefully it'll be seen in other places, but I don't know exactly. There's someone in the audience who has worked with the aphasia support group and is interested in speech pathology, who I basically handed over my hard drives to and said, somebody needs to make a real documentary. Like, that's not maybe what I want to do or can do, but I'm not delighted with the documentaries that exist on aphasia. And another reason to want to do a panel like this is to recognize that I didn't make a project that tells lots of people all about aphasia and what you can do to help your aphasic friends. And don't worry, you'll get better if you just, that's all true. That's not my work. So, but I kind of feel like I really want that to be someone's work. So if nobody else will do that work, I might end up doing it.
Can I kidnap Sorry. I want to know what you think. What are your thoughts about the project? What did you see? What did you experience?
I haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, but just in hearing everybody speak today, I think a lot about language and how the body experiences language, non-linearity perhaps in language. Lots of people think they communicate very well with one another, but they don't, even though they are saying what they feel. And just thinking about different ways of communicating and different ways of using words, and yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated the project. Thank you so much.
I felt there was something especially interesting about the film in that the speakers had a richness in their expression. So verbally, it may not have been as eloquent, but the richness came in the expression of the voice. Okay.
From hearing everybody speak, I appreciate the emphasis on communication being a whole experience, and that so much of communication of what we do now is like a picture and words, and that's the representation. And a reminder that when you speak with people, it's a mutual connection, and they're seeing you and you're seeing them, and it's not only about what you're saying, but about your expressions. And I notice how Dave uses Dale, sorry, how you use your hands so much, and yeah, just about the whole idea of communication, and that is something I think that everybody can be reminded of more, and how you speak about the richness of this group, and that really comes from that experience, and that's interesting and great.
Are there people with aphasia in the audience who are, okay, so this is a very selfish question, but like my whole shtick about like I didn't make the video that tells the world about aphasia, and you know, how is it seeing this kind of abstract, fancy, arty thing for you guys who have more of a stake in wanting to know that people in the world learn about aphasia? Yeah, all of you who think I'm talking to you, yes, I'm talking to you. You have something to say.
I had my stroke in 19... Okay, one of my problems is numbers. It took me a very, my speech is okay, but it took me a very long time to figure out that there was no number between 4 and 5. I mean, you know, it took me a very long time to figure that out. I just, you know, couldn't figure out that there was no whole number between 4 and 5, right? And now I can count to 10, but after 10, it's a problem. And if you can imagine trying to go through life, right, and numbers are so important, right, and that's for me has been a challenge. And I think a lot of people have that challenge with numbers, and they find tricks. You know, nothing upsets me more than someone will call me and they leave a voicemail message. Call me at 314, right? And they say it so quick, right? But it takes me, I have to listen to that message 10 times to process those numbers. So anyway, that's for me, I had my stroke in 2006.
As I'm already emotional having started talking. As someone who has survived a significant brain injury, it's just affirming to share in the shared experience. So thank you all for sharing. It's particularly affirming, although I'm not aphasic, but just having dealt with some of the things that I think people deal with is that we can call invisible, right? They're not physical, so they're difficult to talk to people about. So I think Susan Swan, her name, when you talked about the experience of being at the opening and being overwhelmed, and I've experienced that a lot, and to try to explain that to people that haven't experienced it, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I feel a lot of times I've had a friend say, "Oh yeah, it's really loud in here," and I'm like, "No, it's not.
You don't
that it's
understand.
loud.
Yeah.
I just can't handle it. I can't process."
Yeah.
And so, just thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much. Can I add a story of the numbers with Andrew? I was in the hospital. I couldn't speak a word, and I couldn't sleep. I knew something happened. It's kind of terrible, you know. I am a yoga teacher. So I said, okay, I will calm down and I will meditate. And so I said, okay, I'm going to meditate and I'll count my breath. It's a very simple formula. And so I said, 1. Oh. Wow. 1. And after searching in this vapid mind, I said, wait a minute, I can only take a breath at a time. I can only, 1, I can only take 1 breath at a time. And that was a meditation, and it's a philosophy as well. Does that make sense for anybody? But am I?
You're great.
The show is about language and loss, and did you have any feelings about them? I mean, because I know the people, I am aphasic, it makes so much sense. I mean, the sculptures, what did they have to do with the film? What did the boxes have to do with the, I just want your minds to.
She's a really good moderator because she doesn't let you get off easy. So one of you will have to say something to satisfy her, or you'll be here all day.
Well, I have a thing. I think to both of you, like the idea of like a straight narrative documentary versus more artistic. For me, it was more like feeling, like, right? I mean, for me, it was like this, even if it was, I try to be linear, but it was feeling, like, even if you, I mean, I didn't quite get everything, but I felt it, certain things. And like the sculptures and like the box, not the box, sorry, the parable, the spaceship thing. What I thought about this spaceship, what I thought that meant was like you could see the image of the rock was the, anyway, was the, sorry. You could see the thing was a hologram, and you want to try to grab it, but it's not there. But it really is there. Like it's there, it's in there. So those things, like the video and the sculptures and everything combined, makes you feel. So that's what I thought was important. Whereas like a straight documentary, you can see over and over and over again, and it doesn't quite get you there the way this feeling does. So for me, that was the difference, and why I appreciated your telling of it in this way.
Actually, I think, Kenny, if I can make a point. I have to agree with that it is a different way of conveying this idea of what it's like to have aphasia and what it's like to try and communicate with aphasia. But I also agree, we need somebody to do the other one. We really, really need somebody to put it out there for the world so that people understand what this is. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure Mike has had hundreds more experiences like this, but whenever I tell anybody that, any of my coworkers, any of the, many of my friends, I'm running this book club for people with aphasia, the first question is, what's that? Nobody knows what it is, and it's actually a very common condition. I think everybody knows someone who's had a stroke. Everybody knows someone who struggles for words on a regular basis. Very few people have a word for that, or even understand that there is a word for that, and that there's a reason for that. Before we can have decent public services for people with that disability, we need to make sure people even know what it is. I was talking to a neighbor of mine a couple months ago. She asked me what I'd been up to, and I said, we have this book club for people with aphasia. Really, what's that? And so I explained to her it's this acquired language disorder that often results from stroke, and you have trouble processing language, and you have trouble speaking, and so on. And then she paused and she said, well, my mom had a stroke. She can't really talk. She didn't know that there was such a thing as aphasia. Her mother had aphasia, and a very profound aphasia. I don't know that anybody in her family knew that there was a word for it. I don't know that any of their doctors had said it. So we need somebody to do that film and make it really much more publicly. We need to build public awareness and make this common knowledge. And then we can really start to just make it better, not just for them, but I think for all of us. It's one of those things, if you understand that this exists and you try and create a more accessible world for this condition, I think it's better for everybody.
By the way, it's the law. The American with Disabilities Act says that any public institution, which does not just include government buildings, it's any public setting, has to do whatever is reasonable to accommodate people with disabilities. That's why we have ramps for wheelchairs. If you have a stroke and you end up in the hospital, and after you medically stabilize, they send you to a rehab ward, you'll get a manual in the rehab ward that will orient you to the rehab ward and what your schedule is, et cetera, et cetera. It will be done in a way that if you only have limb paralysis, you'll be able to understand where you are and what's going on. But it's not written in a way, and there are ways to write things so that people with aphasia can understand things. You can add picture supports, illustrations, et cetera. Even in our hospitals, we're not in compliance with the law when it comes to aphasia. So that's just an added point there.
John? Okay. Oh.
So, sorry, going back to the experience, and when I looked at this versus other film installations that I'd seen, what I had noticed was my focus really shifted. I felt because there were less words being said, I took every word as having more weight than when I've seen a documentary. I might go look at it and hear da-da-da, and then this, and then this, and then this, and you kind of don't really listen. And it made me think even in everyday life there's so much rambling and how little weight we let words have. And so when I was here and I was listening so intently for every single word, because I was like, there's a lot more work going into which words are coming out, and I need to really listen. And it made me think about how little we really listen, usually. And then with the screen that had one word coming up at a time, I noticed I looked at that a lot longer than I looked at the words on the wall, because there were more, and it was the same principle applying, that when I saw a bunch of words, I was too lazy to really read them, but when they were popping up one at a time, I was forced to be like, what does this word mean? And it did something really interesting for my focus, and I don't know if that was the point, but that's what I took away from the installation and the sculptures. I really enjoyed it. And thank you all for sharing so much.
John?
I found the piece, I saw it a few weeks ago, and as a caregiver, husband of somebody who had a ruptured brain aneurysm and a massive stroke, I found it on a personal level, it was deeply moving to me. Couldn't help it, you know. I didn't know what I was getting into when I sat down, but I thought, just if I could backtrack like 9 years, what would a lay person, you know, or a civilian, as we call people who haven't experienced stroke or anything, what would they see? And I thought initially, like, it's just artistically, it's set up very well. The whole installation were incredible, very clear. The three screens were very clear. The sound system was good. The audio was good. All that technical stuff was great. But I think it was particularly effective, I think, just for anybody who's seeing it, not just a survivor or a caregiver of a survivor. As Mike, right? Yeah, as Mike touched on at the beginning, there's almost a prejudice that we assume about this carrier of meaning we call language, and our sometimes diluted preferences that we haven't even examined as to how we're going to get our information, or how we're going to give our information. And to have that, have our entire world, especially hers, shattered in an instant. And personally, I watched it happen. I watched her brain explode and basically die in front of me. To have that entire system of communication completely shattered, and then to realize that everything I assumed about language and how it carries meaning may or may not be all it's cracked up to be. The essence of communication isn't just what I do, you know, all day, right? With my thumbs or with or what I'm doing right now. And just to have that voice be given to these three people was a tremendous experience, and I hope it goes lots of places. And I even kind of hope some people who watch it who've never seen anything like this are really uncomfortable for a little while. And experience something new from it. And I hope, I think the world of the project has lots of room.
I wasn't going to do this, but I thought, because it's very typical of me, I thought I would share something with you that might be useful. It's something I came up with. I'm a biology instructor, among other things. And one of the problems that students have is that they take the exam, and they say, I know the information, but I couldn't put it on the exam. So they know the information, but they can't express it. Now there's a relationship, I think, I don't think it's aphasia, but there's a relationship to knowing knowledge. So I came up with a test. And you can all try this. Okay? Think of, I'm going to give you the name of a country. I'm going to give you a letter, and you're going to try to come up with all the names of the countries that you know that start with that letter. And then when we're done, we'll see, because I can only think of a few, we'll see if you missed them. But you'll know all these countries, or you should know most of them. Okay, think of all the countries that start with the letter K. Well, this might be interesting. Hold up fingers of how many countries you know. So how many countries do you know? So there's 2, there's 1, there's 3, there's 2, there's 4, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. Okay, I'll tell you some I know. And when I tell you these words, you'll know these countries. Kenya, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Korea, and I'm sure there's more, but I just wanted to show you that is a simple test. You know the knowledge, but you couldn't retrieve it. So that was...
Well, that's a great point, because I think sometimes people with aphasia get confused with people with dementia. And if we imagine that we all have a mental dictionary in our head, okay? People with aphasia, those entries in their mental dictionary have not been erased. They're there, they're having difficulty accessing them, going to the right page where the word is that they're looking for. So we'll see people with aphasia if we give them some kind of naming test, where one day they'll be able to say the word, and then the next day they won't be able to. That's different than in some dementing processes where the page is being erased. That person won't be able to name this picture of a cat today. They won't be able to name the picture of the cat tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So you're right. There's a difference between having knowledge and being able to access it. And we all experience word-finding difficulties, and as we age, that becomes more pronounced. You know, I think if the next time you have a word-finding difficulty, if you notice some of the frustration that you feel, and then imagine if that was something that you were experiencing on a persistent basis, that might give you a little bit more of a sense of what it's like to have aphasia.
We'll take one last comment.
For me, this stroke has really simplified everything. And nothing, here we go. Anyhow, what I wanted to say about this, I carry something on my key ring that I got from group. And it says, I have aphasia. Please be patient on one side. It says, a loss of words, not intelligence. And when I have a problem, and I'm talking to somebody that doesn't know me or know my, I don't hesitate to hold this up. And it simplifies the situation that I'm in.